This video is going to be longer than probably most of the videos on this channel, and it's for a few reasons. I'm going to be kind of completionist in the way that I'm doing these reviews over the course of the years, and this is to finish up 2008. And when I started doing these reviews in 2008, I wasn't necessarily as disciplined with scheduling and when I put in the dates. So I have these 3 books, I literally have 3 books here, that show up as having been read in 2008, but they're out of order and they're in weird places. So this is going to finish up all the books that I read in 2008. And when I started this, I talked about only reading 3 to 7 books a year, but I have all these different books, far more in 2008. I think this is going to put us up at like 14 for the year in 2008. So there's a chance that these books were maybe not even actually read that year, but they're each interesting in different ways. And there's only one of them that I particularly would dive deeply into on this channel for reasons we'll talk about when we get into the specific books and their reviews. But so as a result of all of that, I'm putting them into one massive video here at the end of 2008 to do the review. So the first one is the Michael Palin Diaries from 1969 to 1979, the Python years. Long things. Michael Palin was an actor that was in the comedic group, the Monty Python folks. I got it as a gift, but I gave it 2 out of 5 stars, and I wrote this review about it sometime in 2008, but maybe we'll see why it's included in a batch this way. I said, so I left this book on a flight from Minneapolis to Dallas, and while it wasn't particularly bad, I won't be rebuying it to catch up where I left off. The book is transcribed from Palin's diary throughout the 1970s, and quite honestly, though I only reached midway 1972, the majority of it was plain work. It was a pleasure to see his family's reaction to major world events like the space race and Bloody Sunday, but for a recreational Python fan, the diary itself lies somewhat unremarkable. If you are a rabid fan about Monty Python or have inklings towards Anglophilia, then by all means, this is the book for you. Otherwise, it'd probably suit you best to try out someone else's memoirs. So that's one of the reasons why I didn't want to include it in with its own video here, because I didn't like it so much. But the point there was well taken. If you love Monty Python and all the work that they did, you'll actually really like seeing the sort of behind the scenes that Michael Palin brought to it when he was there. The second one is The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fistfight in Heaven by Sherman Alexie. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and to understand why I'm including it in this mix of videos, you can go back to, I will actually link this at the end of the video, but the earlier Sherman Alexie book that I reviewed, which was The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. I'm still conflicted about talking deeply and bringing a lot of attention to the reviews of problematic artists, and I still want to have that conversation. So I'm going to put this one here, and this is a 5 out of 5 stars. It's not on my favorites list, but I did want to talk about it here because just being completionist about the books I read in 2008, but I'm still conflicted about talking about those problematic artists. So this was the review that I said about The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fistfight in Heaven. I was consistently moved to different emotional places as I read through the stories in this book, and that could be one of the best compliments I can pay to any form of art. Sherman Alexie has the ability to connect and transform and befuddle and amaze all at once. I was intimidated by much of it, as the Spokane's reservation's frame of reference seemed so foreign to me that I thought I might be too ignorant to give it the attention and understanding it deserved. But when I found myself in that confused and remedial state, I was mesmerized by his vivid imagery and impressionistic approach to storytelling and memory. Whether you read it as a memoir or simply fiction, I think it is a fresh and welcome departure from what people seem to be reading these days. It is officially 16 years old, but I know I needed to read it right now. And of course, the timing there is in 2008. So again, I'll link that earlier conversation about Sherman Alexie at the end of this video, because I'm still sort of muddling over it about how I take in art from problematic artists or artists that we're not sure that we want to support anymore. It's a great writer, great book. I really liked that book. Really liked everything I've read from him. So I'm conflicted about it. The last one that goes on here, again, in this sort of mix of 2008, is The Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut. And this is really interesting because, well, I'll tell you after I read the review, but I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. And I said this, I said, reading a book 60 years after Vonnegut wrote it is totally unfair to him. It is clear that he had visionary ideas because so much of what he creatively described in 1959 is reality today. Again, that's 2008. His suppositions about the future show how sensitive he was to the human psyche and where our desires, conceits, and wanderings would lead us. I don't want to say that his style and substance don't hold up or anything, but I just found myself thinking how great this book would have been then as opposed to how great the book is now. The philosophies examined in the book are phenomenal and thought-provoking. As a reader, you will be consistently challenged to think about your purpose in life as well as who is ultimately in control of your actions and motivations. The biggest conversation piece may be the idea that considering these concepts in the first place is futile. As a stimulating work, the novel is a success. For my taste, however, the oddball science fiction story used for the stimulation wasn't particularly enjoyable. So now I put this last in this group of 3 because as I'm reading this review of myself, I'm actually finding that it might be more relevant to me now in the way that I'm considering life and all these things now. I think it's interesting that my review specifically talked about how over time the book's relevance or importance seems to have waned, because now I'm thinking, this is 15 years later, and I'm thinking that the concepts might be more relevant to me now. So the concept of a Kurt Vonnegut book being out of time or being time relevant, depending on your experience, I think is something that's really interesting to think about too. And I think people who read a lot of Vonnegut might agree with that. I literally, just before I sat down to start doing this review, was watching a YouTube video, one of the Lex Friedman videos called Aliens Are Here. Wasn't for a particular interest. It was literally just passing as I was doing meal prep for the day. But they actually referenced this book in it. Both Lex and his guest referenced this book in it. And the interesting thing about aliens and exploration, and exactly what I talk about here in the review, about the meaning of life and our motivations and what's in control, who's in control, and our actions, and the fact that considering these concepts in the first place might be futile. So I'm feeling, of course, the synchronicity of, this book is something that's poignant now, or that should be re-examined. Now, of course, I have this long reading list, and I do read slowly, despite talking about potentially 14 books in 2008. But this is making me interested to go back and read this. And I only gave it 3 out of 5 stars. So we're putting this, I'm going to call this a triple play. We've got these 3 books in here. The Sherman Alexie is going to refer back to the Sherman Alexie before. The Kurt Vonnegut I might actually pick up again, and or maybe read some commentary about it or something, just like the video I watched. The Michael Palin, from the beginning, it could be another category, another playlist of videos on this channel, in that I have a favorites channel. It's going to be small. There's not going to be a whole lot of books that are going to be there, but I also have a whole bunch of books that I started and didn't finish. I'm not going to put this video in that playlist only because I think the more interesting discussion might be about these other 2 books that are there, but that might be a playlist in the future, books that I started but didn't finish. And why is that interesting? I don't know. Potentially the reasons why I didn't finish them might be interesting too. So what I'm taking away from this is I still want to talk about Sherman Alexie. I might still want to read Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut again. And I still don't really need to go back into the Monty Python stuff. So here's the end of 2008. Next week I'll be starting 2009, and there will be years that in this review of the books that I've read where there will be far less books. But 2008 was a big year, and a bit of confused year too, in that everything is a little bit out of time, much like the experience of trying to figure out your place in a Kurt Vonnegut book. So, till next.